This is what Jesus came to give us. This is why it matters that he is our high priest. This is why it matters that the faith that he founded, different from the high priest of the Old Covenant, that we get to know him. Amen?
Amen.
So we founded our faith. That's 7, 8, 9, 10. We got through a lot. Sorry, I don't know if you're tracking that.
Wow.
We got through a lot. Now we're in chapter 11. And the second thing that he did is he perfected our path. He perfected our path. So he founded our faith. He actually gave us this ability to have this faith in God. But then perfected our path. He showed us actually the right way to live. He didn't just kind of give us the ability like, somebody gives you a present or something like that. He said, here's the instruction manual also. Here's my example of exactly how to live this life that I've given you a chance to live. He perfected our path. Now, living the perfect life, in Hebrews, the writer talks about running the perfect race, is difficult because we make a lot of choices. I read something yesterday online about a study that Cornell University did, and they say that we make more than 200 choices every day, only about food. Now, we make 200 food choices a day. Now, if you're making 200 food choices a day,
holy moly,
we're talking thousands and thousands. And how do you even measure the number of choices that we make? To live a perfect life is incredibly difficult. But this is what Jesus came to do, to show us exactly the right way to live. And not just kind of the right choices to make, although if you study the Bible and really try to figure that out, there are a lot of practical things that it says about choices that we can actually make. But not just that, more I think the writer of Hebrews is talking about what we need to really value. What's really important. Because our choices are going to flow from that. Right? The things that we value are the things that we're going to make choices to really do and invest in and spend our lives on. And Jesus showed us exactly the things to value. But it wasn't just Jesus. There are men and women of faith, and the writer of Hebrews starts from the very beginning of time.
Yeah.
It says there are men and women of faith all along who have showed us this right path. Now, Jesus showed us the perfect one.
Right.
But these people also showed us some incredible examples. And the amazing thing, when you look at it, and I know some of us have probably read Hebrews 11 before, but when you look at it, it's pretty surprising. I'm going to organize it here this way. This is the person. This is what their faith inspired them to do instead of this. And this was the result in their lives. And look for a second at what it means to live a life of faith, to live the perfect life.
Okay.
Abel gave God his best sacrifices, rather than just kind of giving God some. Like, yeah, that's good. It's good enough. And as a result, it says he was called righteous. Enoch walked with God, it says, rather than, I can just live my own life, do my own thing. As a result, he was taken to be with God for eternity. Noah built an ark, which seems like what a stupid thing to do on dry land, and with this, come on, right? This is dumb. And this thing, and it was huge. It is like, your life's work, even at like 600 years old. It's still, like, this is a major undertaking. Just because God, appeared, and this is like, yeah, okay, right? Appeared to him and said, hey, I'm going to rain and do this flood and stuff. He would have much easily just said, hey, no big deal. Like, whatever, I must have eaten something funny, and, that's a little crazy. Let's just live my life. As a result, he saved his family and himself. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they went out rather than kind of staying at home and just living a life of comfort in the city where they lived. So they lived in tents in the desert, out in the wilderness. And as a result, they inherited God's city. They left their own city behind, but inherited what God had promised to give them. Abraham, also again, but a little different, he trusted God's promise. God promised that he would give him a son. Rather than living a life just kind of constantly in doubt. And I don't know if you can relate to this, but sometimes I'm just like, well, God, I don't know. Are you going to really do that? And it can be so easy to waver back and forth.
Right.
But rather than indulging that, he trusted God's promise. He went out there on it. As a result, he saw the promise fulfilled in his life. He saw his son. And through him, multitudes of descendants later on. Moses grew up as really a prince in Egypt, but chose to be mistreated and poor along with his own people, rather than enjoy the wealth that Egypt offered. As a result, he saved Israel. Now he says, look at all these guys. Gideon, Samson, David, Samuel. He's like, listen, he's like, there's tons of people I could go on and talk about. But look at what their faith inspired them to do. This is the perfect life. Here we go. Put to death by the sword, by lions and fire, tortured, jeered, flogged, chained, put in prison, stoned, sawed in two, persecuted, and homeless as a result of their faith, rather than live lives of luxury and self-indulgence. It says as a result, they conquered kingdoms. It says they administered justice. They were people who spread justice on the earth. They gained God's promises. They saw miracles. They were resurrected from the dead and commended by God, ultimately. And the perfect example, as I said, of this, and this is where the Hebrew writer kind of just settles down in Hebrews 12 in the beginning. He says, but, all this is great, but the perfect example is Jesus, who went to the cross. The summation of all of this stuff. Worse than any of this. And all of this put together on the cross. Who gave up, rather than living his own life, a life of luxury and self-indulgence, certainly way beyond anything that anyone else could have had. Living in wealth, doing whatever he wants, comfort, whatever he wanted. And as a result, saved us for eternity. Now, if we were to look at this life, and this is why I kind of have, you can see the columns, kind of, right? When you look at this column over here, the faith-inspired versus this one, which one looks more like your life? Now, that's challenging. As I was preparing this, even, I was like,
This is great, Ron.
honestly, this looks a lot more like mine. And does God really want me to, go jump in the lions? Does he want me to, go to the zoo and, right? No. I don't think so. Okay? So it's not that, right? It's not like, okay, hey, I'm not being, put to death by the fire, I'm doing something wrong. Not necessarily. But I think what it comes down to, and this is what the Hebrew writer is saying, is that Jesus showed us the perfect life. He showed us what really to value. And that is, do we value these things?
Yes.
Is this really the top of your priority list? Or is it avoiding this and pursuing this? What really matters to you at the end of the day? What are you really, what's important in your life? Is it being called righteous, being with God, saving your family and others? Inheriting what God has promised you, seeing His promises fulfilled, saving others in your life, conquering these things, gaining what God has promised, seeing miracles, and being ultimately commended by God.
Amen.
Oh, Ryan.
Is this what we're about?
Come on.
Or are we about avoid the cross, live my life? It's hard. It's really hard. But the Hebrew writer is saying, look, this is what Jesus was about. This is what He did. This is what He saw as important in His life. This is what He pursued. I pray that we don't invest our life in the wrong things.
Right.
A couple of years ago, this is an article I read. It's about the Jets. Jets fans?
Yeah.
Giants fans? Yeah. Watching the game?
That's hilarious. Everyone's excited because they're so
Alright, but we'll talk about the Jets.
Jets fans here.
This is from November 1st, 2009.
Vamos Sanchez.
They just played the Dolphins. It said the Jets gained 378 yards and held the Dolphins to 104 yards. The fourth lowest total ever by an opponent. Jets quarterback. Jets quarterback Mark Sanchez accounted for 3 touchdowns.
Children?
Sanchez,
Yeah, that's right. Come on.
The recently acquired receiver Braylon Edwards, remember this 2 years ago, made a spectacular one-handed scoring grab. Tight end Dustin Keller played his most complete game this season, catching 8 passes for 76 yards and a touchdown. The Jets defense tamed the Wildcat, which is kind of offensive formation that the Dolphins use, and registered 6 sacks. In fact, Jets fullback Tony Richardson said that Coach Rex Ryan makes a list of things to accomplish before each game. And this week, The Jets crossed off every goal but one. The Jets dominated in nearly every category except the most important one, the final score, which is 30-25 in favor of their division rival. Sad.
Set us up there.
But here's the deal, though. We can measure our lives by a lot of different things. We can measure, the career that we had, the number of friends that we had, the people that liked us, the amount of suffering that we avoided, or the amount of different things that we did. We can measure it in all kinds of ways. But at the end of the day, there's only one way that really matters.
Yeah.
It's this. Did we live for God's kingdom? And this is where the Hebrew writer kind of ends in kind of the end of chapter 12. He says, look, all this other stuff, the whole world's going to pass away. And there's going to be one thing that stands. And that is God's kingdom. And that if we invest in that, that's an investment that's going to last. But if we invest in other things, it's all going to be gone. It's all going to be worthless.
Yeah.
We've got to make sure we invest in the right places. That's what it means to live the perfect life. That's what this Jesus perfecting our path really means. It's showing us that this is what matters, not these other things. So what does this mean? The writer of Hebrews talks about just a few practicals. It means really loving the disciples around you. It means loving each other, like we talked about last week, saying, don't give up to each other, encouraging one another, stay on this path with Jesus.
Amen.
But it means welcoming each other into our homes. It means taking care of one another, building these incredible relationships. And not just with other disciples, but also with strangers and people that we maybe just met at our job or on the bus or on the subway. But it talks about hurting with them, sharing their pain. This is the beginning of Hebrews 13. This is the life, because that's what this is. That's it. It's sharing the pain of others.
Right.
Because God is being honored through it. Then lastly, it's being willing to be persecuted. That there's a lot of things that are uncomfortable here. And really, you don't see a righteous man or woman in the whole Bible who isn't persecuted.
That's right.
You don't see one. And so, it's kind of like, look, if Jesus had to do this, then we got to be able to count the cost and say, this is going to be us too.
Yeah.
This is the path that we are called to follow. So I think, at the end here, just talking about Hebrews, this is what it's about. First of all, who Jesus was, that he's our brother. He can totally relate to us, that he's also our leader, that he's taking us all the way to heaven.
Amen.
We've got to stay on this train. Hold on to him. Never let go.
That's right.
But also remembering what he did. That he founded our faith. That he gave us access to knowing God. And at the end of the day, that's really what is going to sustain us. That's what life is about. And also perfecting our path. Showing us what's important. Showing us how to live. What to really value in our lives. I pray that as we look at Hebrews, and I pray that you can really go back and read it for yourself and really dig out what these things are going to mean for your life. That we would remember how great it is that we get to know Jesus.
Amen.
Like this.
That's right.
How great it is, the God that we serve. And that we would always hold on to him. Amen?
Amen. Come on, Ryan.